Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Well, Northern Irish startup Liquid recently secured $1.5 million to accelerate its operational presence in the US, offering a solution which aims to transform the mergers and acquisitions process for bankers, lawyers and buyers. Liquid is spearheaded by Bain, who co-founded the business based on his own experience as a private equity investor. Matthew joins us now to tell us about how the business has already gained traction in stateside. But Matthew, I'd like to start the interview by hearing about your experience as an investment banker.
Yeah, absolutely, Carl. Absolutely. So my route into banking was a little bit unconventional. I grew up just outside Belfast and studied at Queen's University, Belfast. But originally, I dropped out of school initially. And if you know anything about investment banking, it's a pretty prestigious environment, which is pretty competitive to get into. So I worked really, really hard after I kind of re-enrolled in school to break into the industry. And I think one of the biggest hurdles I had was actually that first step of going through the interview processes. I think I broke some sort of record. The careers advisor told me in Queens, where I applied to something like the most applications without getting a job offer or without getting an internship or ever. So quite the achievement, which I'm proud of. But I ended up finding a great mentor at an investment bank called Macquarie. And he actually took me, he gave me a year out of university to work at the bank, where I worked in mergers and acquisitions and capital raising. So working on IPOs, equity capital markets, etc., in their tech M&A team. And very strange environment for me at the time. The intensity cannot be understated. But the learning environment is phenomenal. So my first deal I ever worked on was a $6 billion take private, and there was a team of 4 of us. So at 20 years old, I had this opportunity to dive into real transactions at the highest level, work with incredibly smart people. Didn't sleep for the entire year, but I came back and felt that I'd learned a lot more than I ever could have thought. And when I graduated, I then joined Daiwa, a Japanese investment bank, to work in their industrials team. And it was a similar experience, very intense, learned a lot, but always wanted to go onto the buy side.
And it was your own experience as a private equity investor that resulted in you developing the idea for Liquid.
That's right. So again, moved from investment banking to private equity, where I found great mentors who taught me a lot about the space. And I worked for one of the largest single family offices in the US, where I was one of the first junior hires, a company called Silver Stripe Investment Management, where we invested in a range of different asset classes, credit, equities, venture, but all in the financial services space. And it was in my last year of that role where I was leading a strategy to acquire up to 50 small to mid-sized independent financial advisory shops in a kind of a buy and build roll-up strategy. I was able to sit on the board. I was able to be heavily involved in that process. And what I realized was that the process of buying smaller companies, having come from banking where I was buying large businesses, or advising on the buying of large businesses, was much more challenging. It was almost like the smaller the deal, the more difficult it was to get over the line. And I felt that this was a real problem, Carl. I felt that, there's a lot of small business owners who want to exit. We have the wealth transfer that's going on at the minute. We've got a lot of people at sort of 50, 55, 60. They want to retire their businesses. And the process of doing so was painful. And what we realized was a lot of the problems, although they were different, every business is different, they were kind of rhyming at every point. And we felt that with the emergence of AI, with this macro trend that was happening, that there's something we could do about it. So yeah, it was during that process I came up with the idea for Liquid.
So what was the problem?
So the problem fundamentally was we realized that, look, lawyers are very good at lawyering, bankers are very good at advising, and people who are selling the business know a lot about what they're selling, right? And buyers know what they want. The problem is never finding companies or finding the right buyer. People will buy profitable companies, and they will often pay around the right price for those assets. However, it's the process. It's actually getting all parties to work together, having a single source of truth, maintaining momentum and ensuring trust throughout that transaction process, it's actually where deals fall down. And there's varying statistics around this, but there's about 80% of M&A deals that actually fail. Whenever they close, they fail after, right? So they don't provide any shareholder value. Or throughout the process, again, 70 to 80% of deals just never close. And that means people are shutting down profitable businesses because they just couldn't get a good deal process going to ultimately sell their company.
But is the main reason for deals not closing a finance-related issue as opposed to a paperwork-related one?
Sometimes, yes, you have a situation where, of course, it's difficult to get the right price, and sometimes people have, if the market shifts, you'll often see that a lot of deals, maybe, I don't know, let's take tech, right? 2021 deals were trading at 20, 30 times revenue. The next year they're trading at 5. It's very difficult for people to swallow that. There's a price mismatch, and that causes a problem. But in most years, in most scenarios, if you have a business that does 10 million of revenue and 3 million of profit, people will come and buy that business off you for 4 or 5 times profit. I mean, that's pretty consistent. The issue is actually getting people to stay focused for 6 months, 12 months often period, getting everybody together, making sure costs don't creep, the business still runs effectively, and there's effective trust built up in that process, because people want to know that what they're buying is what it says in the tin, and quite oftentimes it isn't, right? And that due diligence process is what often causes deals to fall down.
And the current process for deals is a data room is set up. Information then is dropped into that data room as part of the due diligence process. So how does Liquid change this?
Yes. So what I realized through working on that buy and build strategy that I mentioned, Karl, and the IFAs, was that there was a lot of very small issues that kept on reoccurring that accumulated into a failed transaction. So we had issues, for example, around version control, right? So people would be operating off an old version of the legal document, right? Or you would find inconsistencies across files, right? Quite often you find that the data room is almost like a static document repository. And then what happens is the deal is actually done over email. So what you'll have is you'll have the seller interacting with a lawyer and the banker's not involved. Then you'll have the buyer interacting with someone else and everybody else isn't. So you have this kind of fragmentation of communication that happens across the deal. And all of a sudden you don't have a single source of truth anymore. And you've just got this dated data room sitting there as all this other stuff is happening over email chains. So what we do at Liquid is we effectively say, look, let's kind of create a central source of truth where everything is in one place, where all the communications happen within Liquid. We automate Q&A processes, which you can come back to. We solve the version control issue. We remove all inconsistencies that come up throughout the deal process and ensure that at any time, anybody involved in the deal can come in, know exactly where anything is, full transparency, enhanced accuracy, and drive sort of that momentum in a deal.
And what role does AI play on the platform?
So we have a number of AI tools at the moment. One is our assistant, right, which is becoming more and more common in a lot of different software plays, right, which is the ability to kind of ask the data room anything. And one of the key differentiators that we have in that is that actually with most AI products, when you ask a question, you get an answer, right? If you take ChatGPT, for example, you get an answer and you've no idea where that information has come from, right? And in an M&A deal, that doesn't work, right? That's a bit of a disaster, right? Because you don't know where, you've no audit trail. However, with our software, with every question that you ask, you'll get a source, you'll get a reference, you'll get where that information seems to go against another piece of information in the data room. So you're constantly able to ledger everything, audit everything. Q&A is a big thing that we do, Karl, which is, one of the lessons I learned in these processes is in most M&A processes, about 70 to 80% of questions that are asked, believe it or not, in a due diligence process fall into two categories. One is they're asked before, so they're asked multiple times by different parties, or the question that they're asking, actually the answer to that resides within the data room already. So with AI, we're able to solve both those problems. We're able to see that similar questions have been asked, provide that same answer. So you have a record of, okay, look, we can push this along and we're consistent. And also we'll flag up the answer to a lot of questions people are asking automatically.
And Liquid recently launched in the US. So, how do you plan to gain traction with equity investors, corporate lawyers, and investment bankers stateside?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was kind of bizarre. Our first user of the product was actually a firm based in Minnesota. We got them via Twitter, and we wanted to explore that a little bit more. So we ended up, I did a bit of a trip before we'd raised our institutional round to come to the US. I came for a conference 1 week, ended up staying for 9, and we had a live demo with a corporate lawyer, a private equity shop, or a banker every single day from cold. The market really needs this, particularly in the US, where costs are rising, right? And deals are increasing generally across the board. And people are pretty sick and tired of standard data rooms when they know what technology is out there. So we were able to get demos with major players, cold from LinkedIn, from a couple of conferences, from some referrals. Came back and did that again this trip, and we've had similar success. And our intention is actually to come out here full time. So we've been very direct. We've got right in front of our potential clients, turned up at their door, showed them the product, tried to build that trust, and that's how we've been pushing it. But we are going to adopt a lot more kind of mass go-to-market strategies over time, but we think the direct approach is appropriate for now.
And how competitive is this space in the US?
So there's a few different types of competitor classes, I would say, in this space, right? So you've got your incumbents, which is your Intralinks, your data site, your big players who've been around for a long time. They have a lot of trust, but ultimately they're big, right? They have a product that hasn't changed that much over the last 10 years, and but they're well accepted in the industry. Then what we have is what we would call sort of point solutions, which is a lot of platforms out there that do one thing in an M&A process quite well. Like they do a particular type of due diligence or financial analysis, and they maybe even use some AI. But in terms of being able to provide that full service platform that replaces the data room, but ultimately links into the law firm, the banker, the private equity's workflows, uses the latest technology to really enhance that process, really solve for the key pain points, we think that we're pretty unique in that space.
So, what are your growth plans for the US market over the next 2 years?
Over the next 2 years, predominantly we've been targeting lawyers and bankers. We want to massively increase our foothold in the private equity market. We've recently started to sign on strategic acquirers as well. So we realized that our sort of total addressable market here is pretty large, right? It's basically anybody who touches an M&A deal is a prospective client, and we're getting interest from all of those parties. So our objective is to probably raise a seed round at the end of the year, and we expect to be doing our average contract size is within 6 figures, so we expect to be doing a couple of million by the end of the year, and advance further beyond that in year 2.
And Liquid recently raised $1.5 million. Did your private equity experience make it easier than most startups when you went looking for finance?
I think it did, and I think for me, a big aspect of raising money is the story. Right? I mean, effectively at pre-seed, it's entirely about the story. So it was easier, but probably also because I'm in this. We're setting up a business in that space. If I'd worked in private equity and then set up a fashion business or a restaurant business or something like that, I don't know if it would have been a step change to having worked in another industry. I think investors love to see that founder market fit piece. Dan, my co-founder, is also a best friend I've known for 10 years, a phenomenal engineer. Being able to see two guys who ultimately left their job, who were making good money in good industries, moved back in with their parents, focus on something that they had experienced, who knew each other very well, and were able to drive growth, right? Build a product, get it to market, start raising capital from angels, was ultimately what allowed us to build, to do a full round with 3 VCs and various angels. So yes, it helped, and it definitely helped in terms of looking at legal documents, and you're able to kind of keep your wits about you in a process. But I think that founder market fit piece is the most important thing, and we definitely had that.
And how will you use the funding that you've raised at $1.5 million to develop the US operations?
So part of the funding will be used to hire more engineers. Dan had actually originally built the first version entirely by himself. We've just had another fantastic engineer who has been really developing our AI capabilities. We'll be making a few more hires in that department, and then business development. So really trying to grow get to sort of, get a few dozen customers in total by the end of the year. So actively moving out to the US, actively pushing that and preparing for our seed. That's how we see most of our capital. And we've also achieved SOC 2 accreditations, and we're moving towards our ISO and things like that. So it's very important we build that trust, as I'd already mentioned. So accreditation, cybersecurity, all that is already embedded in. So we spend some of the money on that.
And is there an opportunity for you to integrate Liquid with any existing systems that are currently operated by lawyers or bankers?
There is. So we see ourselves integrating with some back office technology. So, we don't see ourselves integrating with data rooms as we see ourselves ultimately competing with them, but we see ourselves integrating with sort of pure play document management suites that can link in to the data room. So you'd have your back office suite, and then when you go to open a deal, you kind of link into Liquid. We do see ourselves doing that, and then also on the sort of the marketplace side as well. So being able to source deals and transactions, we'd like to link in with businesses that way to make a kind of a full service end-to-end solution. We think we can play a real part in that as well.
And having been on both sides of the private equity journey, what advice do you have for businesses about maximizing their opportunity for investment?
I think that story piece is fundamental. So the founder market fit, being able to walk in and say, look, I've experienced a problem. So therefore, I know this industry better than anyone. I know that there's a serious problem that's not just something that I personally experienced, but something I've experienced that other people have spoken to. We went to the market. We've talked to these people every day. Doing that, and really doing that, I think a lot of people do like 10 customer discovery calls a week, and it becomes almost like homework. Really understand what the customers are looking for. Are they really feeling the pain that you felt? And then going and having some sort of technical ability internally, not outsourcing all your tech somewhere else, but finding that class A, like that real tier 1 CTO, if you're not already yourself, if you're not technical, being able to build internally, work really, really, really hard, and spend all of your time with your customers, having already experienced the problem, you will raise money. It's almost a certainty. But if you don't do those things, it starts to get harder.
And finally, are you building this business with an exit in mind?
I mean, right now, we're trying to build the best business that we can, right? We're trying to build the solution that our customers love. And if we do that, we will have opportunities to exit. Whether we do or not, is going to be dependent on the timing and depending on the opportunities that we look ahead for. But the reality is right now, if we can build the best M&A platform for lawyers, bankers, and private equity, we'll have no shortage of revenue growth, profitability, and exit opportunities, as well as a bunch of avenues to vertically and horizontally integrate with other platforms and grow into other areas in the space. This is a huge area. We ultimately want to build the infrastructure that lets deals happen. And that's our goal right now.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Matthew Bain from Liquid, and there are certainly exciting times ahead for this solution-oriented business.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.